more commentary.
How does simply they have
Beijing has had less to say than I thought. Territorial integrity is a big thing.
yeah, that was astounding.
Not liking the idea of
He was then Secretary General of the MPP for a couple of years.
position that well known. Not to me.
Are we ready?
Democracy project at the Center on Democracy Development and Rule of Law in the Freeman Spogli Institute. That's a lot. I want to welcome everybody to this Taiwan Democracy Project special event. Today we have the President of the Republic of China on Taiwan, Ying-jeou, speaking on U.S.-Taiwan trade and economic relations. I'd first like to acknowledge, before we get into the substance, that our Taiwan Democracy Project has received and continues to receive generous support from the Taipei Economic and Cultural Office in San Francisco. And we have several members of TECO here today with us. We want to welcome them especially. And I want to acknowledge Director General Bruce Fu, who has been the Director General since September 2012, and before that was posted in D.C., I believe, in Washington, D.C. And we'd like to thank him again for his office's generous, warm, and open-minded support of our project. Let me say a little bit about the project itself. The mission of the Taiwan Democracy Project is to foster the study, the discussion, and ultimately to foster a deeper understanding of how democracy works in Taiwan. And I expect we will have a lively discussion about that today in the Q&A. I will tell you now, we already have copies of the President's speech. And I will tell you now that much of the content of that speech is aimed at an American policymaking audience, so that it mostly focuses on Taiwan's relations with the United States. If you are interested in hearing more about, as I suspect many of you are, Taiwan's internal domestic politics of trade, I want to make a shameless plug for our next event in the project. May 5th at noon in this very room, we're going to have a speaker from Temple University, Rosalind Xue, who is a professor of political science there and also a visiting scholar this year at UC Berkeley. And as luck would have it, we arranged this before the events of the last month, but her talk is going to be exactly on this issue of domestic politics and trade in Taiwan. So we've had an extraordinary response to this event, and I would love to see many of you attend that event as well, because there will probably be more opportunity to engage with our speaker on the issue of trade politics in Taiwan.
Today, ROC-US cross-trade relations and confidently engage Beijing from a position of strength. Continued American backing under the mandate of the TRA for Taiwan's meaningful participation in international organizations is another present-day example of U.S. support for our foreign policy goals. In May 2009, the ROC Health Minister attended the World Health Assembly in Geneva after an absence of 38 years. In September last year, the Director General of our Civil Aeronautics Administration was invited as a guest.
Points. And I'll do this very briefly in the hope that it turns into a discussion with all of you. The first is to begin where President Ma did, the 35th anniversary of the Taiwan Relations Act. A portion of which was actually drafted here. Victor Hao Lee, then in the...
And since there's none that I can disagree with, and I think they're very well and expertly stated. I'm going to pivot a bit using your sixth point as kind of a segue to the current situation. I feel there's a need, in part because of all the emails I've gotten in the last 2 weeks.
I would say that it's wrong to characterize the cross-strait trade agreement that's under consideration right now as solely a trade issue. It's really, it contains three pieces in the dispute. So there's fundamentally a political issue of whether closer economic integration
and each time he answered, it was a more abbreviated, which apparently was they're walking away from the six issues because he didn't recite all six of them. The State Department, again, my understanding, issued a clarification in Danny Russell's name after it that the six assurances remain in place. There is no change under the Obama administration. And that was what Russell was trying to convey, and if that didn't come across clearly, he apologized for it. That I just want to close by underscoring one of the points that Larry just made about the importance of the public debate, of public education, of bringing the public along. That I do not pretend to understand all of the intricacies of legislative procedure in Taiwan. But while I was there, I heard several times the explanation of, we don't need to do this. We don't need to debate all of these points because the procedures don't require it. Well, process matters. And whether it was technically required or not, it should have taken a very short period of time before somebody said, we got to do this anyway. Because the failure to do it will engender suspicion that there are things there that are more injurious or potentially injurious to the interests of the people on Taiwan than the negotiators believe to be the case. Without public understanding,
这个合作就像这种 crowdsourcing 哦 crowdfunding 哦，就是集资啊，踮咧这个苹果日报开登这个广告第一条的广告嘛，哦啊，踮咧这个纽约时报的这个国际版，咱嘛订一个广告嘛，哦，大家拢知影，哦，拢真紧20几分钟就订啊，吼，啊，这摆苹果日报吼，明仔载吼，你搁开一版，哦，你搁是就是切，你看半版吼，半版的首页吼。 啊，苹果日报呢，就嘛有咱这边提供的这个资料，吼，就是学生囡仔能